Hi, I'm Douglas Stuart, and this week I am the Nerves Recommender. My first choice is the Outer Hebrides. I think it's my favourite place on earth. There's lots of reasons why I love it, but in 2019 I was beginning to write my new novel, and I'd grown up in Glasgow and we'd never had money really to explore the rest of the country. And so I was sort of like thinking about, I wanted to write a story about loneliness and about maybe what it was to grow up gay in a rural place. And I took 12 weeks out of life and I went to the Outer Hebrides, and I'd never been before. But when I made it to Harris, man, I fell in love. The landscape was just stunning, but there's also really fascinating things that all sort of interconnect there. One is the Gaelic language. The other is a very sort of devout form of Presbyterianism. And the last that is very close to my heart is actually Harris tweed weaving. It's weavers that make the cloth in the same way that they did for hundreds of years. They weave in sheds behind their homes, and there's just such a connection with the land and with all the textures. I've just gone on this journey recently where I'm trying to buy as much as I can because it will last me my whole lifetime. And so I just bought a brand new overcoat, and I have this weird sort of fantasy where I'm going to leave it for one of my 5 nephews when I like leave the planet. So my next pick is CMAT, the musician, the songwriter. You know, I think she has talents that poets and novelists would envy. That song, Lord, Let This Tesla Crash, is, I think, one of the greatest things I've heard recently. For me, she's got skills on a level of Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, and you know, it's so exciting to see someone just also so young step into their talent and become this. I think she'll really become a generational talent. But the other thing that's brilliant about the songwriting is it is full of emotion, but one of those emotions is joy and humor. And I think that's a very profoundly working class sensibility, you know, to be able to take the piss out of things and to turn it on its head and to jab at it and stab at it. And I'm just constantly surprised by how smart, you know, the lyrics are. But can I read some lyrics to you?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. When I turned 22, I had no real friends to speak of. Who would watch me like you? If I'm honest, I don't have one now. Dressed up for the pub, felt so silly and quite underloved. Until you were you and pulled out all 7 inches of that song by Culture Club. I'd been yapping on about that month. I spun, you spun, in some attempt to make me happy, and I was. My next choice is my first reading experience. You know, as an author, you're often asked what was your favourite childhood book. Sometimes you're asked what was read to you at bedtime, and I think we have to just acknowledge that not every child has books when they're children or is read at bedtime. And certainly I grew up in a house that didn't have books. And that was very similar to a lot of the houses around me. But what I did have at home was a brother who was 13 years older than me. And my first reading experience as a kid was diving through his music collection. One of the things we've definitely lost is that experience of the LP and of that huge sort of gatefold experience where both as a working class kid you were confronted with lyrics and writing for the first time, but you would also often saw artwork that you would never see on a modern album. You know, people took time with concept and telling a story, and I hate to say that the first poet I ever read was Meatloaf, but it might be true. And, you know, I remember like Queen's Night at the Opera, and I think about that Michael Jackson Thriller album, and I think about Pink Floyd's The Wall and the anger that was contained in that. My next choice is the artist Trackie McLeod. I am obsessed with Trackie's work. You know, he's a queer working class artist from White Inch in Glasgow. What I love about his work is not only is it really smart and really clever, and it plays on themes of nostalgia, but it does really important things in how it makes comments on society. He loves to skewer lad culture. He often takes things that are sort of iconic within working class communities, whether it's the banger car or the boy racer, or, you know, it's the tracksuit, and then he sort of flips it and puts luxury insignia all over it and sort of brings those two things together. But what's important for me is how he uses humor. I think often art can be very serious and a little self-serious, and that can sort of push people back. You have to be smart enough to understand it, and it is the opposite of an invitation. And what Trackie does, which is amazing, is he invites everybody in, you know. I also love something that he does that's very vital is he represents queerness in working class art, and that's really important. One of my favourite series of his is he takes a bunch of football tops, jerseys, and he sort of like puts funny things on them, you know, like big girl's blouse on the front. But for any young queer person, you know, we're kind of horrified and traumatized by that experience of being on a Scottish football pitch as an 8-year-old in the lashing rain and feeling probably not very good at it and feeling very confused about our own feelings. And for me, I mean, I love that someone just confronts that head on. My next pick is about Italian cinema and the representation of the working class, and Sophia Loren, who I'm absolutely obsessed with. You know, I love Italian cinema because how they sort of portray the working class in a way that is fully realized, that uses all the emotions and all the colors of the palette. You know, there's loads of joy and there's lots of happiness, and there's also no unflinching when it comes to the hardship of life. And one of the vehicles that I love to sort of follow through that is Sophia Loren. She's got such an impressive filmography, but she's just such an incredible icon. You know, she's a phenomenal actress, she's a beauty, but a lot of her career has been focused on the portrayal of working class women. And as a son of a single mother who grew up in Glasgow, I love to see that, you know, and it's such a rich filmography. I think my favourite film is Marriage Italian Style from 1964. Sophia plays Filomena, who's a young woman who becomes mistress to a very affluent businessman, played by Marcello Mastroianni, if I'm saying that right. It's funny, it's really smart on sort of how women and men can use each other without giving their whole selves to each other. It's also very clever on, you know, how women can give their best years to a man and be left with nothing in the end. But there is one scene, if you see nothing else, where right after she is sort of discovered to have been lying about her death and he is sort of proposed to her almost in death, she is so furious at him, but at the same time she's absolutely starving because she's been pretending to be dead, and she's shoveling pasta into her mouth at the same time that she's just screaming at him. And for me, like, just that sort of like working class abandon is just perfect. You know, it's just a really strong performance, but I love it. It's one of my favorites ever.